Welcome everybody to today's webinar on the topic, Taking Back Control, the Sovereign Cloud Strategy for 2025. Back to school across the UK today. I've just dropped the kids off, and what better time to think about where your data is stored and is it secure? Today we've got an interesting topic which we want to shed some light on. UK IT leaders are under more pressure than ever. Ransomware attacks are more destructive. Regulations like NIS2 and UK GDPR are stricter, and hyperscaler costs are creeping up with hidden fees. Today we'll share insights on how to take back control with sovereign cloud strategies built for resilience, compliance, and cost predictability. We've come up with 4 questions to kickstart our conversation today. There's a comments box, so we would welcome you to add your questions, and we will pick out a few during question time at the end. Welcome Enrico, Paul, and Johan.
Oops.
Sorry. What IONOS and Cubbit have in common is that we're European companies and we lead with data sovereignty. I'll now let Enrico introduce himself and to introduce Cubbit.
Yeah, so I'm VP Product and Partnerships at Cubbit. Practically, my role is to stay in the middle between our engineering team, our customers, and our partners, and try to, catch the wind and understand all the trends in the market, and report back to build the strongest possible roadmap. Cubbit, on the other hand, is an innovative technology. Practically, the team started building this network of storage nodes that can be geo-distributed, so multiple data centers. They can stay all in one data center, but actually the beauty of it is that it can be distributed, geo-distributed, and you can access data from everywhere. So the protocol is S3, so it's a standard protocol, but the ability to distribute data in this way allows for a lot of efficiencies, including better resiliency and overall performance and so on. So it makes perfect to keep control on your data.
And Paul, over to you.
Yeah, hi guys. I'm Paul Clarke. I'm on the commercial side. The reason being I'm here is we built the partnership with IONOS because, as Enrico said, we are a software-only company. We don't have any hardware to run it on. IONOS has plenty of data centers and a good brand, which means we can attack Europe as an S3 provider, ensuring sovereignty not only to a postcode and a country down to the very drive it sits upon. So it's a great partnership. I'm looking forward to moving it forward.
Wonderful. And Johan?
Awesome. Well, I'm on the IONOS side here, so outnumbered today, but I'm a senior cloud solution architect, which sounds like a huge mouthful, but essentially is the technical point of contact for both partners like Cubbit, but also end customers to help onboard, navigate, and understand how to best deploy into the IONOS cloud, as well as understanding kind of the trends in the market and that shift towards a more modern architecture or more useful architecture for our customers.
So thank you very much for your introduction. So let's just jump in then. So from your perspective, what is the single biggest challenge UK IT leaders face right now when it comes to keeping control of their data?
And I can start here by saying that, you would be lucky if it was a single biggest challenge. Actually, there are so many challenges at the moment that it's very difficult for IT leaders to keep control on their data. And the reality is that, and maybe you read it on the press that a few weeks ago, even Microsoft declared that their sovereign cloud is not really sovereign at all. So they can grant, they can't assure you that the data stays where they say it stays. So even if it's you are sure that you're saving your data in the UK, actually they can move it any day. and they can give access to, the US government and other stuff. Now, if you think about it, I mean, everybody started using the cloud because it's simple, because it's easy, because it's you are removing a lot of capex and move everything on the opex, etc. But actually, over time, many companies are finally understanding that. Well, on one hand, it's very expensive. It's not that it's easy. So having somebody that gives you, let's say, a more controlled environment, and it's a better way to think about it. And on the other hand, there is all these regulatory frameworks that are changing, and you need somebody, you need a partner that is much more familiar than a company that is based abroad, that understands what you do, how you do it. They can provide the necessary compliance to regulations, etc. So not just having sometimes the data center in that country, but legal entity in that country and all everything that comes with it. So that's for me the very first finding partners that can help you become more independent. And becoming more independent meaning having the ability to build an IT stack that is made of components that are easy to understand. I mean, for instance, I hate when I find these users that they gave away everything. I mean, all their data and everything on a managed service that it's a black box. And then you start thinking, okay, now we have an art project, yes, but we are forced to do it with that black box because everything is in there. We don't have any control. We don't know how to, get our data back, and that becomes, a nightmare. So you're forced. There is a huge lock-in in that, and that's probably the first big concern for every organization, small or big.
Do you mind if I jump in there to expand upon that point? Because Enrico, you're correct, and the word control is interesting to people that I speak to on a daily basis. It's not only the fact that you've lost control of where your data is, because hyperscalers were brilliant at bringing that product out, making it very easy to use, very easy to consume. It followed that trend of going from capex to opex, pay as you go, all these sort of trends that happened in the industry across every vertical. Some were quicker, some were slower, but pretty much everyone's been there at least once and maybe come back out a little bit. But once your data's there, you've got control of how you access it. Of course you have. But what you don't have control is in new trends like AI coming up and people using those large data stores they've got out there to get the best out of their data. But now they're using it, but they've got no control of the ingress-egress costs. So what they thought they were paying is now, if they thought they were paying $5 a terabyte, they might be paying $20, $30, $40 because they're moving that data around all the time. And the IT users, the business users, love the ease of it, but the guys that are holding the purse strings are terrified. And not only terrified of that, with what's going on in the world with a certain politician in a certain country threatening tariffs and everything. And once again, we still don't know if they're legal. But that's the point. We don't know. So there's no control, because if these tariffs happen and the big three are American firms and the EU decide to fight back and put tariffs on there, if I'm spending £1 million a quarter, for example, on AWS, and that goes up to 1.2 million, where's that coming from? And then that's 20% on top of any ingress-egress cost. So that control of not knowing where your data is, one, if it's regulatory, two, not having any control of costs because they now control how you use your data, and three, what's happening in the world at the moment is terrifying people.
Yeah, and I'd piggyback off of that from maybe more of a quote-unquote technical lens as well, in terms of you break it down very accurately, Paul Enrico, saying, okay, it's that shift from capex to opex, it's that shift from kind of owning to then pay as you go, that and all of these different shifts are happening not only at the, let's say, the financial and the hardware side, but also in the skill set side. With you've gone from somebody operating my servers to now that person needs to have the skill sets to both operate the servers but also deploy the software and understand that in the kind of new DevOps model. which means that, of course, you're going to be inclined to use a managed service because it takes away a lot of the onus of setting all of that up. And ultimately, that kind of going back to the question of what's the single biggest challenge, and Enrico pointed out there are so many that there's no single biggest one. But for me, it's very much about how can you shift your mindset, whether it's you want to keep something on-prem, whether it's something you want to move to the cloud, whether it's a hybrid scenario, which is very common, but it is how do you keep your infrastructure and your architecture simple enough that you don't get looped into all of these lock-ins, you don't get looped into all of these loopholes that might mean your data doesn't reside there or gets moved across, and so you're in breach of regulation or compliance, and you maintain that control over what you actually built and what you're trying to deliver to your end customers without having to be tied into, as you said, those increasing costs, that pay-as-you-go model when you turn on the logging, which is all of a sudden going to double your costs, even though there's no extra infrastructure put in. And all of a sudden you're needing to install the latest security tooling because you've kind of lost an understanding of how the security of the managed service works compared to your standards. And it becomes quite an infinite loop of ongoing questions and ongoing kind of upskilling whilst not having the time to upskill, and therefore kind of pawning off a lot of the responsibilities onto the cloud providers.
Yeah, and that's a great point as well, because also, so you're trying to make business decisions for your customers based around somebody else's SLAs, rather than your own that you want to set for your customers. You have to work around somebody else's tools, and then go from there.
Yeah. And to be honest, I mean, there is a so if I try to resume everything that you said, okay. So we have these major challenges by losing control, and when losing control, I'm with John here. So the idea here is that you're losing skills in your company, and of course that the black boxes that I mentioned, are very, let's say, exciting at the very beginning because it's easy to deploy, it's easy to get the first result, but then you have to keep that box as is. So you are not there, you can steer development of the product, for example, you can steer anything. So if things change, and I'm not only talking about things change outside, I mean, I'm not talking about only regulation that comes outside, but if you have a new opportunity, you need to innovate, you need to do something different, then it becomes harder because you don't have the liberty to reuse your data, for example. You mentioned AI. Okay. Am I forced to do AI with that specific cloud provider or with the specific technology stack because everything is in there and I don't have control? I mean, I want the liberty to choose and to move stuff around. And maybe from the infrastructure point of view, so it's okay to have a big service provider, but I want to build my ecosystem. So the ecosystem, they are luring in this ecosystem, and then you don't have any way to escape and to build new stuff. That's for me the biggest challenge today for most of the companies I meet.
And Enrico, I'm just going to jump in there. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to move to question number 2. So hyperscaler fees and hidden costs are a constant complaint. In your view, what's the most effective way organizations can bring predictability and transparency to cloud costs?
I guess I can maybe start us off here on the cloud side. It is something that, funnily enough, a little anecdote. So I used to work for Microsoft as architect, engineer, you name it. I had a few hats over there. But the most common workshop I delivered to customers was something called a cloud optimization or a cost optimization workshop. And that in and of itself goes to show the kind of the concern that people have around, I've deployed something, it's great, but now the bill I'm getting every month is terrifying my CFO, or is the finance team is yelling at the tech team for the costs incurred for what they're doing. And the truth is, hidden costs, potentially a harsh term, but I think it is right. It is when you deploy something, you have all of these bells and whistles you can add on saying, oh, do you want logging? Well, of course I'd want logging. I want to understand what's going on. Do you want the diagnostics on top of that? Well, yeah, why not? Let me actually get a better understanding of what's happening behind the scenes. Oh, would you like to add this geo-redundant so my data is replicated? Actually, that seems smart because I want to do that. And a lot of the times, the kind of the decision making isn't as proactive as you would want it to be. It's mostly kind of following along with a setup that, as Enrico mentioned, is quite simple and intuitive. And you're kind of thinking, well, why not? Actually, this makes sense because I don't want my data to be lost, or I want it to be replicated, or I want that. And without realizing at that moment, hold on a second, this is actually going to duplicate my costs. I'm doubling up on the storage I have. The logging is going to keep increasing because I've set the retention by default to be a year, and therefore over a year, it's just going to keep increasing my logs. And so back to the question around what's the most effective way organizations can bring predictability and transparency to cloud costs is, I'd say it's 3 easy things. Number 1, only use what you need. And it might sound very basic, but follow the principle of I'm going to build and I'm going to have the core, the security, the elements that I need. And then if I need a bit more logging, I'll add that. I'll enable a specific feature and then start working up from there rather than having everything and then trying to work down and narrow down what you need and don't need, because that's often how you end up from high cost to then cutting corners, which is never a good idea. The second one is predictability is the less managed services. I'm not saying don't go up the stack, right? Because there is benefits to modernization, but the less visibility you have into that black box, the less you're prone to be able to understand the pricing that goes within it of the API calls, the GET requests, the post versus read-only type requests, the number of read-write operations happening that will accumulate at 1 cent per hour per this. These are costs that will be present in a lot of clouds. Thankfully, IONOS, we try to do things a bit differently, but as a whole, it's definitely something that is quite present in the market. And so just be aware of the more you use managed services in that black box operation, the less predictability and visibility you have because they're kind of wrapping it up. And to finish off this kind of rant, the kind of the easiest way, and I will keep coming back to this message, but if you follow point number 1 and 2 of making it agnostic, starting simple and building up, the third one that comes in is consistently reevaluate. Don't wait until that bill comes in to try and understand, oh, wow, this actually is a cost incurred. Have some cost alerts. Look into something regularly. Check that once it's deployed, it's stable for a week. Does it add up to what you had forecasted financially, but also technically? And that proactive approach is, yeah, maybe you're going to say, oh, wow, actually, this is costing me more, but it's 1 week. It's not 1 month, 1 quarter, 1 year before you realize the damage that has been done from that financial perspective.
Yeah. And if I can add on top of this, I mean, so one of the things that I really hate is, that we are losing common sense for, additional tools. So one thing is, yeah, I totally agree with you when you say, okay, yeah, so you have to keep control, you have to, think about what you're doing and why you're doing it. Okay, and again, with these black boxes, is really difficult because it's also the way they are, at the end accounted in the bill that you receive from the cloud provider. It's very, there is some magic inside. I mean, you never know how much you're going to spend. And so we added FinOps tools, for example, and everybody is jumping on this trend about, oh, let's add additional tools to understand what we're doing, so to get some, advising that is a point in time advice, so that you solve the problem, at that point, and then you have to run the tool again and again and again, paying additional money for these tools, and in the end, it doesn't make any sense because you have just added an additional layer. What will happen the next time? You will add an additional layer again. So that's ridiculous. So we have to go back. We have to rediscover the skills that we have in our organization. We have to understand better the infrastructure. I understand that it's maybe boring, or maybe it's not as fancy as adding more resources to your cloud environment, and it's easy. But again, the art of optimization, the art of understanding and doing better is is what we are missing here, what we are losing, or what the organization are losing. So that's a very important point. So if you want to keep costs down, you have to understand that not all the resources are the same, and you can't keep throwing resources just to solve a problem. I mean, try to optimize your code, for example. Sometimes it's we talk a lot about DevOps, and many times you see, oh, I don't have enough resources to do this. Okay, what's the problem? Well, we can put more RAM or bigger systems, or and yes, of course you can do it. Okay, it's easy, but at some point it doesn't work anymore. I mean, and that's a problem that we see all the time. So keep things under control, meaning understanding more what you're doing. That's a thing.
And Paul,
yeah,
what would you like to add to that?
I'll keep it quick, because the problem when you get me and Enrico on them, we don't stop talking. So I'll keep it quick. And they both said what I was going to say, just much more eloquently. The only thing I'll add to it is keeping it simple. Hyperscalers were fit for purpose when they came out, and then all the things that you needed at additional costs, whereas people like Cubbit with IONOS, now all of those enterprise features are built in from the product. It's a set price. There's no hidden cost. So go out, have a look. That's it. That's I'll leave it at that. Let you move on.
Short and sweet.
Yeah.
So question number 3, cyber storage has been named a top trend for 2025 by Gartner. In your words, what makes this approach fundamentally different from traditional storage, and why does it matter? So over to you, Enrico.
Well, so the landscape that changed a lot in the last few years. I mean, we were used to think about storage as a very simple piece of your infrastructure, and there was no really security related to it. I mean, and just because it was attached to your server, so the server security was more than enough. Then we understood over time that even the basic ransomware attacks today, they target storage first. I mean, your backup first. So we started addressing this kind of problem, adding new functionalities like immutability and a few more. On Cubbit, we understand this very well, and all our technology, especially because it's geo-distributed, so our data path, it's very simple in the sense that the first thing that we do online while we are receiving the data is encrypting the data itself, and then we split it in a segment and we send the segments across a perimeter of your choice. That makes sure that if one of the nodes is attacked, then the hacker inside finds segments of encrypted data without them up to rebuild anything. Okay, this is the first layer. So just don't give them an attack surface, and on top of it, there is all the rest. I mean, all the features that you expect from a modern storage infrastructure. So we have to build this new storage system, or the infrastructure in general, that it has to be more resilient to these kind of attacks, because in the end, nobody cares about the network. Yes, you can have a DDoS, so the service could be stopped. But if they steal all your data, it's much worse than that. I mean, so you can stop for 1 day, maybe 2. And yes, it's a huge loss. I mean, millions for some companies, much more for others. But if you don't have your data anymore, what happens? And so my idea here is that we have to build systems, storage systems that are resilient. Yes, I mean, this is important, but they must be much more secure than in the past. Especially now, S3 is a web protocol in the end, so you access it via a very standard interface. What I was saying before is that when you have a single hard drive or a single storage system attached to a single system, that was easy. I mean, the access was limited somehow, so you have to access the server first and then the storage later. But now S3 is exposed to the internet, so in some cases you have access from millions of people, and you have to be sure that you have everything in place to be sure that your data is not accessed by the wrong people, that the sign-on mechanism is strong and robust, etc., etc., etc. This is what it means. I mean, from this point of view, we have to design systems that are 100%. Well, 100% is impossible, but as secure as possible, without any open attack surface.
I mean,
yeah, for me, I mean, it's just terrifying anyway. Yeah, but that's why I've got Enrico and Johan to go lean back on when it comes to these conversations with the customers.
It's funny, right? Because when we talk about cyber storage, it almost sounds like a given, right? You start thinking, well, of course my data needs to be encrypted. Of course it needs to be secured. It is essentially the kind of the gold mine of any company is how they handle and interact with the data and keep customer data. The interesting thing is, if we take a second to just look at the way it's evolved in terms of what we consider security, is the typical, let's say, security process used to be network-based security, whereas like, do you have your firewalls? Do you have your DDoS protection? Do you have essentially your VPN gateways and all those network appliances helping you filter down and inspect and control that traffic? But to Enrico's point, at the end of the day, if you get a ransomware or those kind of attacks, the error becomes a quote-unquote human error. Have I gotten access to the credentials? Have I socially engineered that person? Have I been able to kind of attack their identity? So there's that move to the zero trust approach, to that kind of assume everybody's been compromised at a human level and then go from it and start securing everything identity with RBAC, role kind of access policies, which I know Cubbit are big on, the kind of the integration of zero knowledge so that nobody has that full understanding of everything that goes through. And logically, if you then take it to the step further, cyber storage is going to be a part of it. As Enrico said, we're finding easier ways to expose data to our applications to integrate it in a more streamlined way. So of course, we need to find better ways to secure that from the typical ransomware attacks, from the kind of there's one big pot of gold, rather than actually if you split the data or disaggregate it or kind of start having it fractally encrypted or whatever it might be that you're using as a process, will become critical in the years to come to make sure that you have that control over the data. And maybe a last little thing that isn't quite cyber storage, but linked to that kind of different approach, is also understanding that there's much more value being placed on the data nowadays, which is logical based on all the breaches we've seen. And as part of that, I think that there is a little kind of honorable mention to be said around how also do you treat that kind of backup, disaster recovery, the storage, the replication, the approach to how your data is stored, where it's stored, and how you control it. Because if you don't have a clear understanding of where your data is, how accessible it is, tomorrow my server goes down, for example, then how long am I going to be down for? How much money am I losing per second? What is my SLA? And Paul mentioned this earlier. I'm not talking about what's my cloud provider's SLA. I'm talking about what's my actual application SLA to get back to that data. What sort of breach do we have? So can I recover quickly from that previous breach and restore a previously existing file because something's been corrupted? Maybe there was a human error. Maybe it was a malicious attempt. So that kind of honorable mention of cyber storage as a security protocol around the storage, but also taking into account the availability, the access, and the type of resiliency of the data you have, are going to form that kind of unified storage-centric security trends that Gartner and I think all of us are noticing in the market these days.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and in fact, I mean, if I had something here, I mean that, from my point of view, and I am, a strong proponent of not cloud first, not AI first. I mean, these are all trends that are really, I mean, yes, there is a lot of hype around them, but, AI is nothing without data. So data is everything. It's the most important asset of every single company today. So, and I'm surprised that most of the users, most of the companies I talk with, they don't have a data first strategy. I mean, there are a lot of messages, now we are going to do everything with AI. Oh, good. Where is your data? So is it labeled? Is it ready for any activity that is necessary before feeding the data to for training to a model? Because that's a problem. Okay, and so cyber storage is part of this wider strategy. So you want data to be secure, you want data management, we don't want everything in this step, and that's the most important. Data first.
Yeah, great. So if you had one piece of advice for IT leaders in the UK looking to take back control of their data strategy in 2025, what would it be?
Can I jump in there? Because I don't know if anyone's heard it. It sounded like someone was emptying a recycling bin behind somebody. So it made me think of something else. Look, as we've already said it, I mean, taking control is massive. Everyone's consuming the hyperscalers in some form or the other. We're just talking about the data here. So the S3 object store, which is now data's got so big and out of control, and it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. I've worked in life sciences and EDA and stuff. It's just well, I mean, the first terabyte I sold, and I've been in storage since the dinosaurs, was £1 million. That just so you understand how the world has changed. And now I don't know how many terabytes I've got on my laptop, but it's a lot. But taking control of your data, knowing where your data is, to the point where you know exactly what server it's running on. This leads into another thing which we've not touched on today. It's a whole different topic. It's the environmental side of things, and that quest for carbon zero, net zero. If I can tell you exactly in the cloud what power consumption is, what I'm using, adds to your figures, you've taken control of that as well, which aids your company in your ability to, one, know exactly what your environmentals are, but two, you can control your SLAs because you know what hardware it's on there. These days it's all bare metal install, etc. But you can exactly the level of redundancy of RTOs, RPOs, downtime failures, redundancy across sites, across countries. You can do that with a click, and you're not making extra copies of the data. If I want 3 copies of main, backup, and then both in AWS, and I go, oh no, what if AWS fails me? I'll have a copy in Azure. That's 1, 2, 3 plus probably 4 copies of data. That's a lot of money just for that insurance policy when you're actually depending on somebody else's SLAs for it. So you're paying top dollar for somebody else's best bet. So have a look. As I keep saying, hyperscalers were fit for purpose. They were the right thing, but they were just, in storage terms, a JBOD. It was an archive dump when they first come out for the storage side of things. They didn't have all the enterprise features. If I said that terabyte drive, I'd probably go to Curry's and buy a 1 terabyte drive now for 50 quid. I'm not sure. But inside enterprise, that terabyte is still going to be $5,000 because it's got all of the single instancing, it's got all the redundancy, it's got this, that, and the other battery backed. And you have to think this is enterprise data, so you're not just sticking it on a JBOD and forgetting about it and then adding all the costs that hyperscalers do. Companies like Cubbit with IONOS now are producing that enterprise level storage at an exact, predictable, no hidden cost price. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. Funnily enough, you mentioned that kind of the recycling of glass noise. It took me also in a direction linked to storage, but a very different one. And apologies, Georgie, because I know you've got a question for us and we want to answer it. But before that, and you kind of touched on this, Paul, right? It's the idea of losing control of your data isn't just, I don't know where it is, or, I've lost my data, it's gone. There's also the opposite, which arguably sometimes is even more true, which is I have too much data, that the data becomes almost irrelevant. And I'm talking a mix of data of, I have all my customer data, my diagnostics data, my logging data, so much so that I sometimes don't actually use it, especially if I don't have a nice data warehousing solution or a good process around what do I want to do for offloading. But there is also something of, I'm going to keep this just in case, or maybe I'll have this in case I need it. And sometimes that's dictated by compliance and regulatory. But much like the kind of glass recycling of sometimes you just need to dump out the trash can, it is where archiving, understanding the life cycle policies of your data and saying you don't always need to keep everything all the time, and making sure that you're, again, keeping the quote unquote minimum, as in what you find is relevant to perform, potentially optimize, report on, even, hell, as I said, data warehousing, use it to improve your services. Why not? But having data from 10 years ago about the log that I had inside of my OS, completely irrelevant. And I'm, of course, making an exaggerated statement here, but having that reverse problem of I have too much, and that increases my cost, and that increases my lack of visibility, because now it's a lot more to triage through, is also a problem that needs to be addressed. Sorry, we can go back to your question now, but just well, I clearly got inspired by the
Well, I was going to say, what about some fresh news? What about the sovereign index?
So, I mean, maybe that's the news from this morning. I mean, I read it the first time this morning, and this is quite, interesting report. So, Nextcloud, the company behind that's let's say suite of tools that allows you to build these sovereign sync and share plus a few other things. They reported that they had this study around all Europe for looking at what every single country is doing around sovereignty. I mean, services that are available in the country, how much they are used compared to hyperscalers, and it's a bleak picture. That's what I can say. I mean, some of the countries are better than others, maybe Germany, but if we look at UK, Italy, I mean, Spain, Portugal, I mean, across all Europe, you see that it's really, really bad. And I understand. I mean, and so in the past, so the power of this hyperscaler is huge. I mean, they have reach.
It's easy. It's easy as well.
Easy. I mean, and nobody was fired for buying IBM in the past, but now nobody was fired for buying AWS. I mean, that has to change. Not because they are not giving you a good service in the end, but just because the political tensions between the US and Europe and the UK. I mean, how do you know? So even the last week, I read articles about the US administration pushing to remove taxes and fines from potential behaviors of these international players. But the European Commission told them simply no. I mean, but these fines are huge. I mean, 6%. The Digital Service Act says that if you don't comply, you can get up to 6% fines. Up to 6% of your revenue in fines.
Yeah.
And if they get this kind of fine, I'm not sure they will be passed to the users in the end. I mean, to the European users somehow. So and that's huge, and especially if they are going to pay for the taxes that they should pay, actually. So not moving just the revenues to the parent company, but declaring in Europe what they are making. The prices will change. And are you ready to to this kind of changes in the future? Because this is what could happen. And I'm not saying you have to keep everything outside hyperscalers, but now we can live in a multi-cloud. You can start moving back some critical stuff, some stuff that need more compliance and more regulated stuff, and then from there you can start check the difference.
And just on that, UK doesn't have DORA. EU does, and that's where you have to have your data in country and ingest and all that sort of stuff. We don't have that yet. But sovereignty is coming in the UK, and in the UK, most companies ignored GDPR for a while until the fines started hitting. So people start having to report what they've done, and cyber attacks and things like that. And now everyone's on it. No one forgets about GDPR now, and all the data. But so sovereignty, although it's, I think, at the bottom of people's list at the moment in the UK, not so much in central government and research. There's lots of restrictions there, but across most verticals, it's low on the list, but it's coming. And with the hyperscaler saying we can't do it, or it's not going to be done to this level, it's worth looking around.
And before we move to the Q&A section, I just wanted to point out we've got a QR code. So if you would like to continue the conversation and book a meeting with IONOS and Cubbit, just use that QR code and it'll take you to a booking tool. So if we move over now to the Q&A section, I can see a great question in the comments section to kick us off. So how difficult is it to migrate from a hyperscaler to a sovereign storage solution like Cubbit and IONOS? Is it a long process?
Maybe I can take this one first. From my point of view, it's very simple. I mean, there are a couple of things here to evaluate. The workload, of course, and the amount of data. The workload, consider that our storage is primarily S3. So S3 means that is a de facto standard, and some workloads are really easy to migrate. Think about expiring data. So backups. You have a retention of 30 days. You just point to the new repository, which is Cubbit hosted on IONOS. And in 30 days, if your retention is 30 days, you have everything migrated because the old backups just expire and you have the new repository ready and running, and that's it. For other workloads, there are plenty of migration tools. There are some commercial ones, some of them are open source. There are best practices. We have a great supporter that can help you to decide what to do and how to do it.
Maybe I can also jump in here at kind of the architecture level, right? If we think about Cubbit, the different solutions they have, from kind of, you mentioned one which was backup, there's the data archiving, there's the AI factory, there's a bunch of different approaches you take to data, and that's what the workload point of Enrico is. The other element to consider is whether or not you're in a position where you want to migrate or diversify. And the question is Cubbit going to become the place you're moving everything to, or potentially in the first spot you want to make yourself more resilient? We've talked about this a lot today, but kind of give yourself that hedge against any volatility or any tariffs, and therefore you have potentially a dual storage or a replicated storage setup, or somewhere where Cubbit actually is your fail-safe, or on the contrary, Cubbit is your primary, but you maintain your kind of key parts inside of somewhere else. It depends on your approach, and at the end of the day, that's also where the kind of the expertise of Enrico, Paul on the Cubbit side, and myself on the IONOS side, we're always happy to have that chat with yourselves and kind of go through that discussion, see where you're at today, see where you want to be, and help you through that journey.
Okay, and then we've got time, so I'll jump in with another question. I've got, what kind of organizations are already using sovereign cyber storage? Is this just for big enterprises, or does it work for SMBs too?
Do you mind if I jump in quick here? Because
Go for it.
This is something that I've always, so as I mentioned, I used to work for Microsoft, and of course at Microsoft, realistically, if I'm working for them, most of the companies I am directly dealing with as a representative of Microsoft would have been the Fortune 500 companies, those huge enterprises out there. IONOS a bit different, right? We're covering kind of all sectors and a lot of the kind of medium-sized enterprises, and making sure that is accessible for everyone. And I think that this is something that is a bit of an illusion of talking about the hyperscaler. If I use the Rolls Royce of their products, it's going to cost me too much, and therefore it is meant for enterprise. There's kind of that, almost that blocker to entry, which is, I'm not considered enterprise, therefore I shouldn't go for these products because they're too expensive. And that's something that should be demystified, because cyber storage shouldn't be something that is just for the big companies. Every company needs to have a storage process, a storage policy, a secure data first approach to the way that they develop applications. So my short answer to this is cyber storage is absolutely not just for big enterprises. It is for every single person. Much like any of the trends in any cloud or IT platform, it shouldn't just apply to the big players. You should find ways to kind of incorporate it for yourselves, no matter the size you have, because it helps you scale and it helps you be future-proof.
So I can add only that, I mean, we started working with IONOS, and it's, the catalog of, resources, dedicated servers, and other stuff you can find in the catalog is, it's massive in the end. They have plenty of servers, type of servers, and the first customers we have in this, with these joint partnerships, some of them are really small. I mean, they started with us because they found the right kind of resource. They are paying by the month. On top, there is our solution, and that's it. I mean, so it's fixed price, simple. They know what they are going to pay every month. There is no additional fees. They consume everything they want in the small infrastructure, as small as they want. I have to say, very small sometimes, and they can, add additional resources when they need it. So actually, it's for everybody. I mean, maybe it's not for a guy, having his the rest of his IT in a basement and doing video. Professional video, the wedding videos, that kind of stuff. But for the small enterprise, for the SMB also, it's a good opportunity to start. That's my idea. I mean, if you have just a bunch of terabytes, you can start thinking about these kind of solutions.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that, kind of expressing what Johan said. So our products, and talking about customers that we're looking at, to bring with IONOS as a partnership, but customers have got 40 petabytes of storage. Yeah. And we've got other people that got 5 or 10 terabytes. It's the same product all the way through. So all of the features that the guys with 40 petabytes want, you're getting at 5 terabytes. So we're not going, this is, I don't know if people are old enough to remember the big triangle where you had enterprise at the top and SMB down the bottom. And you had different products inside EMC or wherever you're going to be for different areas because it was cost-based. It's exactly the same cost. Now, the more you buy, the less you pay, obviously, but it's the same product. Simple as that.
And look, I'm conscious of time, and I'm also conscious that I cut off what's the one takeaway. So, Johan, I'd love to start with you and give you a chance to answer that question.
No, absolutely. I guess kind of my one takeaway from this, and to be fair, much like there's no one problem, there's maybe not one takeaway. But for me, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, but keep things simple. And by that, I mean, build what you need, build according to your SLAs, your RPOs, your RTOs, your end users. Focus on not what can be offered by a provider, not what is out there as a product. Build from inside, build from what you're looking for. Potentially cloud makes sense, potentially hybrid makes sense, potentially on-prem makes sense. But if you focus on that and build from there and say, actually, we need now an extra monitoring solution because we're not quite there yet, so we want to add that. That is an organic and natural approach. And the reason I say this is not only because it reduces costs, makes your life easier, allows for upskilling, all of those kind of given points. But what it also allows you to do is not fall into the trap of that vendor lock-in, because you're building simple, which means you don't necessarily need all the bells and whistles and all the fancy managed services. Sometimes you do. Sometimes there are use cases for it. That's why they exist. But in many cases, you can get away with not falling into a vendor lock-in situation, which means that tomorrow a tariff comes in on the hyperscalers, you can shift over to IONOS. Oh, tomorrow IONOS, something happens there, I can shift over somewhere else, so I can spread the load. At the end of the day, it gives you that flexibility of movement. It gives you that confidence that you're in a stable position, and it gives you that predictability around your costs and your setup. So keep it simple and build brick by brick.
And I'll just jump straight in after that, Johan, because that's kind of exactly what I was going to say. But also, keeping it simple, it's really have a look around, because what was relevant when you took it on might not be relevant now, because as exactly Johan said, you want to build it as you want it, as your business requires it, rather than what other people tell you can do. And it wouldn't be me without being mentioning something commercial. One particular company was doing exactly that, and they had a problem with the fact that their SLA couldn't be met because the only way they could do it in cost was to have a hot and a cold data center, rather than having the redundancy of both or more. They were spending £150,000 a month on this particular solution. We went to them, actually gave them 5 different data centers with a redundancy of 3+2, and they were paying £90,000 a month. And that wasn't including egress and ingress costs. Just give you an idea. So have a look around. It doesn't hurt.
And closing remarks, Enrico?
Yes, I will be, again, repetitive, like Johan said. You have to keep it simple. You have to keep your skills. And of course, as Paul said, keep your eyes open. There are a lot of solutions. Spending too much on a single cloud provider doesn't make sense. Doing multi-cloud with all solution where you can keep the right amount of control doesn't make sense. So try to understand better your IT. Try not to understand better your data. Place your data where you can have control, especially your mission critical data. You don't want to lose access to your data at some point. And I'm not talking about cyber storage here. I'm talking just the fact that there are plenty of risks outside. It's not just the tariffs. It's not just the geopolitical situation. It's just that you want to have full control of the data. Be sure that your data remains accessible. There is no risk of sudden migration because there is a spike in prices or whatever. So you want to be sure that you have options. You are always in a position where you can make decisions without having somebody on top of your neck waiting to kill you. So that's a kind of message.
Sounds like the mafia. Well, I think it has been a very kind of European themed session today with the crashing glass. I think like seagulls squawking in Rome, or the ambulance sirens that you hear in Europe that you don't hear anywhere else. It was very European. So we loved having this thought-provoking webinar on a very important topic, data sovereignty. So please feel free to continue the conversation and book a meeting. But it's been a real pleasure listening to the conversation today.
Thanks, Georgie. Thanks, guys.
You.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.